You know that feeling when you're so lost in a project or a piece of music that time just melts away? Well, that state of total effortless absorption, it has a name, samadhi. And in this explainer, we're going to demystify it. We're going to see how this isn't some far-out mystical thing, but actually a natural superpower that your mind already has. All right, let's get into it. So this right here, this is some timeless wisdom. It's a Sanskrit verse, a shloka, that describes the mind in samadhi as being like a flame in a windless place, just perfectly steady and still. It's a beautiful way to put it, and for a state that, as you're about to see, is way closer to our everyday life than you might think. Okay, here's our game plan. First, we're going to talk about absorption as an everyday superpower. Then we'll get into the difference between a thought and actual reality. From there, we'll use the idea of a dream to see how that line gets blurred, which leads us to this self-forgetting state. And finally, we'll dig into the really subtle secret of what's going on in the mind when it feels totally quiet. Right, so our first section, absorption, an everyday superpower. The big idea here is that samadhi isn't something you have to go on a quest for. It's not on some mountaintop. It's a natural ability that's already a part of your life. I mean, think about it. An artist completely lost in their painting, they're in samadhi. A musician who becomes one with their instrument, that's samadhi. Even when you're so into a class that you love that you don't even hear the bell ring, yep, you guessed it, that's a taste of samadhi. It's just the mind getting completely wrapped up in something. So this is the key, really. Samadhi is a natural faculty of the mind. People sometimes think it's this super rare, holy state, but what it really is being so deeply present, so engaged, that everything else just kind of fades into the background. It's not about leaving the world. It's about becoming totally one with your focus in the world. Okay, so now that we have a feel for it, let's get a little deeper. To really get how this absorption thing works, we need to look at a really important idea from yoga philosophy, the difference between a thought and reality itself. So check this out. It breaks down like this. On one side, you've got prameya. That's the actual physical object, like a real table. On the other side is pramāṇa. That's the thought of the table that's in your head. Now, when we're awake, we know the difference, right? It's obvious. But what happens when that boundary just completely dissolves? And that question leads us to the absolute perfect analogy for understanding this, a dream. This is where you can see the unbelievable power of an absorbed mind in action. So think about this for a second. Let's say you're thinking about someone who has passed on. And then later that night, you have this super vivid dream where you're actually talking to them. In that moment, in the dream, what are they? A thought or an object? Because they feel completely real, don't they? Like they're right there with you. And here's the breakdown of how our mind pulls off this magic trick. It starts with just a thought. Then, when you're dreaming, your mind gets completely absorbed in it, and it gives that thought all this color and life. And here's the crucial part, the fusion. The mind completely forgets it was just a thought to begin with, and what was internal now feels totally external and real. And that fusion, that's the whole game. It's the core of what we're calling the self-forgetting state. It's the point where the observer, the dreamer, the you, just kind of fades out of the picture. The parallel here is just perfect. When you're having a dream, you're not standing back thinking, oh, I'm dreaming this. No, you are just in it. It's the exact same thing in deep meditation. As your focus gets deeper and deeper, that little voice saying, I am meditating, just goes quiet. The meditator is gone. And all that's left is the pure experience of whatever you're focused on. And think about how powerful this is. A tiger in a dream can make your heart pound, make you sweat, even though you know it's not real. That's the power of the mind. Now imagine taking that same intense power of absorption and focusing it on a profound idea, like a spiritual teaching. In the deepest state of meditation, that idea stops being an idea. It becomes a lived, felt reality, just as real as that dream tiger. And that brings us back to that beautiful metaphor from the Gita. The mind in this state is like a flame with no wind to bother it, just perfectly steady, unwavering, and still. And at this point, you're not even trying anymore. There's no willpower involved. The focus just has its own momentum and it sustains itself completely effortlessly. Okay, so let's move on to our final section, and this one is fascinating, thinking without a thinker. This gets into a really subtle question. If the self is gone and the mind feels totally silent, what's actually going on in there? Is it really empty? I mean, it feels completely still, right?
totally silent. So the obvious question is, are there any thoughts left at all in this state of samadhi? Well, the answer might actually surprise you.
The answer is yes, there are thoughts, but they're what one philosopher called sūkshma vrittis, which means incredibly subtle mental movements. Think of them like the tiniest, almost invisible ripples on a very deep lake. Because the active thinker, your will, isn't engaged, you don't notice them. They're there, but they're happening below your conscious radar, kind of like a camera that's silently recording in the background.
So you might be asking, well, if we don't feel them, how do we know they even exist? The proof is in what you remember after. Think about deep, dreamless sleep. In that moment, you're not aware of anything. You're gone. But then you wake up and say, wow, I slept so well. How could you know that? It's because the memory of comfort, that subtle impression, was being recorded the whole time. The mind was still working, even when you were silent. And it's the same thing with samadhi.
So let's bring it all home. What's the takeaway here? First, that absorption is a completely natural process your mind knows how to do. Second, samadhi isn't about escaping reality. It's about engaging with it as deeply as possible. And in that deep engagement, when the thought and the object become one, that feeling of a separate self just dissolves. And finally, even in that deep silence, the mind is still there, subtly collecting impressions that shape our experience.
And that brings me to a final question for you to think about. Now that you know what to look for, where in your own life do you experience this state of thoughtless absorption? Maybe it's in your work, a hobby, maybe even in your relationships. Because recognizing it is the first step to really understanding this incredible natural power of your own mind.